Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to focus on one of my all-time favorite bands, R.E.M. R.E.M. was the first American band that I got into in a serious way, and so I want to pay tribute this week to a band that I love. However, R.E.M. have a 30-year career. There's no way I can cover it all, so I'm focusing on the R.E.M. that I personally love, and that is the R.E.M. of the 1980s. That's my R.E.M. So if you're upset that I didn't cover anything from Out of Time onward, do me a favor, make your own damn video. For someone like me, who was a fan of this band throughout the 80s, it's crazy to discover that there seems to be a common misconception today that R.E.M.'s early albums on minor label IRS, International Record Syndicate, are somehow lesser works than their major label albums, when in reality, these years saw the band sharpen their already unique musical voice as they created finely crafted indie pop masterpieces. So please join me for a deep dive on the early years, aka the 1980s years, of American indie pop superstars R.E.M. No mandolin allowed. Alright, a little mandolin. Incidentally, the band in this episode was chosen via a poll on my Patreon. Speaking of which, I want to thank my newest patron. Thank you, Tina. I'm so glad to have you aboard. If you would like to join my Patreon and get a shout out on the show, please visit patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thank you. The R.E.M. of the 80s consisted of Michael Stipe on lead vocals, Peter Buck on guitar, Mikey Mills on bass and vocals, and Bill Berry on drums and vocals. In August of 1982, the band released the Chronic Town EP. These are the humble jangle pop beginnings of a band that would eventually achieve worldwide acclaim in the 90s and beyond. But it all starts here, in this murky, mumbled masterpiece of an EP. The band recorded this album with Mitch Easter. There are a couple of songs here I want to call out: Gardening at Night and Million. Gardening at Night's lyrics are perfectly odd, yet oddly perfect. We echoed up the garbage sound, but they were busy in the rows. We fell up not to see the sun. Gardening at night just didn't grow. What does that mean? I don't know, but I love it. For many, many years, the lyrics on R.E.M.'s albums were stream of consciousness derived. It made for brilliant, off-kilter, and hard to decipher lyrics. And their lyrics are just one of hundreds of reasons why I fell in love with this band. And the song Million is about as straight up of a rock song as the band did. Those two songs aren't just my favorite on this EP, but two of my top 10 favorite R.E.M. songs of all time. You know what? I'm going to do what I did for the Fire Hose episode. I'm going to list my top 10 R.E.M. songs of the 80s in the description below. Carnival of Sorts, aka Boxcars, is another very strong song on here. This EP was originally supposed to include another song, Ages of You, but IRS label chief Miles Copeland didn't think it fit in with the mood of this EP. So he personally chose Wolves Lower to kick off this album. It's a great song and it sets the table wonderfully, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Ages of You, as you will learn later. Stumble is another great track here, with stagger step music to match its title. But if there's a true star of this EP, it is Michael Stipe himself. You know, it's always magical when the arrival of a special band coincides with the arrival of a unique voice. Michael Stipe's keening, southern voice was very unique and had the ability to either blend seamlessly with R.E.M.'s music or alternately cut through the music with authority. And his voice is one of the main reasons that this EP stands up today. Housing 5 fantastic songs, this is a flawless EP and a great introduction to the band. In 1983, the band released Murmur. The kudzu on the cover really speaks to the murkiness of the production on the album. Mitch Easter is back in the production chair with the band, but with him is fellow producer, Jangle pop savant Don Dixon, and the two did a wonderful job on R.E.M.'s first full-length album. This album opens up with their big college radio hit, Radio Free Europe. A different version of Radio Free Europe had already been released back in 1981 on their manager's Hibtone label, with Shaking Through as the B-side. The band reacquired the rights to both of those songs with a little help from the lawyers at IRS Records. And the re-recording of Radio Free Europe that you hear on this album, I feel is superior to the original. The band, however, disagrees. Nevertheless, the band released Radio Free Europe as the first single from this album, with a cover of the Velvet Underground's There She Goes Again as its B-side, and it managed to reach number 25 on the mainstream rock chart. Incidentally, There She Goes Again was originally supposed to be included on Murmur. It was going to be the final track on this LP. At the very last moment, the band chose to omit There She Goes Again, so that there would only be originals on this album, and I'm very glad that the band did that. It's pretty hard to envision this album with that song tacked on the end of it. Laughing, Talk About the Passion, Moral Kiosk. This album is packed with great songs. Side 2 opens with Catapult, which is a very fun song, but Laughing and West of the Fields are my two jams on side 2. In fact, my top 3 songs on this album are Radio Free Europe, an unassailable college radio classic, Laughing, which combines pretty vocal harmonies from Michael, Mikey, and Bill, with the best bass line on the album, and album ender West of the Fields, a relentlessly infectious track with a brilliantly manic chorus. I really think ending this album with West of the Fields was a brilliant choice, because given the dreamscape nature of that song, once the album ends, it's almost as if this music has retreated back into the dream world from whence it came, and we're left here in the waking world, flipping the album over and playing the whole damn thing again. My deep cut on this album is Moral Kiosk, which has a gritty guitar tone, and perhaps the most inventive chorus on this album. This debut full-length sees the band finding their shaky feet beneath them, and though on some spots the vocals are still a little bit ragged, for example on the chorus of Shaking Through, more often than not, Mitch Easter and Don Dixon warmly and accurately capture this band's sound. In April of 1984, the band released Reckoning. This is a very strong album. Mitch Easter and Don Dixon ride again in the producer's chair. This album is said to open things up a little bit after Murmur, but if anything, I consider the subject matter a bit darker. This album showed the first indications that the band were destined to move beyond their small college radio audience and were capable of bigger and better things. The album kicks off with Harbor Coat, my all-time favorite R.E.M. song. You all know I'm a sucker for verses, and the verses in this song are my favorite in any R.E.M. song. They crowded up to Lennon with their noses worn off. A handshake is worthy if it's all that you've got. Metal shivs on wood push through our back. There's a splinter in your eye and it reads react. R-E-A-C-T. Incidentally, that's Lenin, not Lennon. I am the walrus. V.I. Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. Aside from great lyrics, another reason to love Harbor Coat is Mikey Mills and Bill Berry's backing vocals, which shadows Michael's voice in both the verses and the choruses, yet neither of them repeat any of the lines that Michael is singing. Bill and Mikey are each making up the harmony parts they want to sing without even listening to each other, or even giving much thought to what Michael's singing about. It's a brilliant technique that I believe R.E.M. invented, and it works. South Central Rain is a tremendous song. It opens, Did you never call? I waited for your call. These rivers of suggestion are driving me away. The whole album has a water theme to it. Harbor Coat, 7 Chinese brothers swallowing the ocean. There's a return to water over and over. Even the artwork has all these rivers of suggestion. I believe South Central Rain is about a guy waiting for a call that never comes because the telephone was swept away in a flood. I remember being a kid and watching them do it on Late Night with David Letterman, the real Letterman show, and just kind of staring at the screen, mesmerized. I thought they were hippies because of Michael's hair, but the sound that came out of them was everything I was hearing on college radio. Pretty Persuasion isn't just the best song on this album. It was among the best songs played on college radio that year. And that's saying something. Don't Go Back to Rockville is another favorite that effortlessly blends the band's rustic Americana flavor with acid-tongued lyrics, warning the song's subject about the dead end awaiting them back in small-town America. The song originated with Mikey Mills, who wrote the song about a woman he was seeing who was about to move away. This track could also be viewed in a larger sense, about the band already outgrowing their humble roots, as this album's success definitely put them on a larger stage. My deep cut on this LP is Little America, which has the most cryptically fun chorus the band has done to date. The biggest wagon is the empty wagon, is the noisiest. The console a horse, Jefferson, I think we're lost. No one else was writing lyrics like that. By the way, Jefferson was Jefferson Holt, the band's manager for many years. The lyrics to Little America seem to be influenced by endless touring, but coming on the heels of the track Rockville, it almost reads as an apology to small-town America. With the lyrics, "Who will tend the farm museums? Who will dust today's belongings?" I see Little America as the Southern American equivalent of We Are the Village Green Preservation Society, and a wonderful way to end this long, rambling, water-filled album. In June of 1985, the band released Fables of the Reconstruction. This album was produced by Joe Boyd, who had been a legendary figure in music since the 60s. Joe founded the club UFO, where the Pink Floyd played back in the good old Syd Barrett days, and he even produced their single, Arnold Lane. And Joe and the band worked well together and turned in an exceptional album. I see this album as a real leap forward musically for the band, opening up with a really bizarre song such as Feeling Gravity's Pull and its Man Ray Kind of Sky keys you in that this is a band that's going to follow their muse wherever it leads. Incidentally, Mikey Mills is doing his alternate backing vocal thing again, which you know I love. Full disclosure, I have a soft spot for this album because this is the album that R.E.M. was touring when I saw them live in the summer of 1985. They put on such a great show. It was an outdoor venue and it was like 95 degrees outside. But Michael Stipe was wearing a long, heavy trench coat, a fedora, and dark sunglasses. And he stayed dressed like that through the whole concert. Honestly, he looked like the logo for the band's label, IRS. Their single at the time was Can't Get There From Here, which I had already known from my local radio station, WLIR, and I was overjoyed when they played it. Can't Get There From Here is a whip-smart anecdote that I like to believe is about a panicked man who can't find his way back to his happy place. I have a few other favorites on this album. Maps and Legends, which is a tribute to artist Reverend Howard Finster, is a very clever song that equates trying to understand a person with trying to read a map, and it creates a wonderfully uneasy mood. Another great song on this album is Driver 8, a rollicking tune. Driver 8 can either be taken at face value, that the overtired driver is trying to get to the last stop, but there are miles to go before then. Or you can take it as a metaphor, that we all have a long way to go as a society. And though we'd love to get to a more evolved state immediately, we have to do it slowly, stone by stone, one by one. Another song I love is Life and How to Live It. The song is a kooky character study of real-life Athens resident Brev Mikis, a schizophrenic who divided his house right down the middle into two distinct living quarters for each of his personalities. When Brev died, people cleaned out his house and discovered a closet that was packed with books. They were all the same book, and the author of that book was Brev Mikis. He had never sold any of them, he simply stored them all. And the name of that book was Life and How to Live It. My deep cut on this album is Old Man Kinsey, which is the band at their most gothic and dour. Ah, hell. Okay, give me two deep cuts. Auctioneer is my deep cut number 2. It has a restless energy that reminds me a lot of West of the Fields off of Murmur. Taken as a whole, this is a very strong collection of songs, and every one of them is worth your time. In July of 1986, the band released Life's Rich Pageant. This LP was produced by Don Gaiman, who had previously worked with John Cougar, both before and after he got mellencamped, and this album has a very unique sound. I'd say for this production, Don Gaiman smoothed out the edges of R.E.M's sound. It's a very lush production. At the same time, a few of the songs have a real epic sound to them. My favorite song on this album is These Days. No, it's not a Nico cover, but that would be awesome. The song is a brilliant, unappreciated anthem that still hasn't gotten its due. I see the song as an upbeat Reagan-era rallying cry for people to unite and heal and gain strength from each other. The best known song on this album is Fall on Me, and it has some of R.E.M's greatest lyrics. I have always felt the best lyrics are specific enough to paint a picture, yet vague enough to be open to interpretation. Fall on Me can work in many ways. As a song about acid rain, about living a pure life, about the fear of industrialization, about choosing your friends wisely, and it even works as a larger question about what life itself really is. Fall on Me is perhaps the best example of the unique Mikey and Bill backing vocals that I made such a big deal about on Harbor Coat off of Reckoning. Just listen to the chorus in Fall on Me for a masterclass in harmony singing. And Mikey Mills even kills it solo on the bridge. Cuyahoga has my favorite bass work on the entire LP. I know, I'm the Mikey Mills fan club president. But still, when everything but the bass drops out, killer. Hyena is a brilliant song, which rails against a nuclear arms race and likens the dangerous, unpredictable powers behind it, on both sides, to wild hyenas. Killer song, literally. Incidentally, on the back of the album, it says that the album ends on Swan Swan H. It does not. The final track on this album is Superman, which was originally done by a 60s band named The Click. Mikey Mills takes lead vocals on this track because apparently Michael Stipe wasn't enthused about doing a cover song. But it's a happy accident because Mikey's sweet voice is perfect to take some of the venom out of the song. It's basically a song about a stalker who is letting the object of his affection know that he is all-knowing and he is all-powerful. But I like to think of the stalker as actually being Superman, and the song's subject being Lois Lane. It really softens the song. Superman wouldn't hurt anybody. And in addition, the line, "I know you don't love that guy, 'cause I can see right through you," plays as a straight-up reference to Superman's X-ray vision, which is fun. Incidentally, all vinyl heads, this album was mastered by Bob Ludwig, and every original copy sounds dynamic as hell. So get on this. In April of 1987, the band released Dead Letter Office. This is a collection of B-sides, outtakes, and cover songs. I bought this a few months before their next album, Document, was released. I found it in my local childhood record store, Serenade Records on Hillside Avenue in Queens, New York, which usually only had dance music. So I was very happy to grab this, take it home, put it on the turntable, and hate it. In all seriousness, the first time I listened to it, I simply played Ages of You over and over and over, as it was the only real song that I loved on it. Incidentally, that song really deserved to be on an LP. And I love that Ages of You almost opens up with the exact drum pattern from California Uber Alles by the Dead Kennedys. Almost. But as an R.E.M. fan of their previous work, I didn't yet have an appreciation for things such as their sloppy cover of Aerosmith's Toys in the Attic. And I must admit, when I heard them doing Roger Miller's King of the Road that ends this album, I seriously almost threw this record out the window. But this album really grew on me, and I've grown to appreciate and love a lot of the odds and ends on it. The song Burning Down was one of the band's first songs, and they were simply sick of the song by the time it came time to record it in the studio. Which does make sense, as the song is pretty traditional songwriting-wise. R.E.M. does a killer version of Crazy by Pylon, which is off their album called Chomp. R.E.M.'s cover of the song is post-punk perfection, but believe it or not, when Peter Buck first heard Pylon's album Chomp, he was despondent because he felt Pylon's album sounded much better than R.E.M.'s album at the time, Murmur. This LP also features fascinating curios, such as Voice of Harold, which was just the music to what would become Seven Chinese Brothers off of Reckoning, but with Michael Stipe improvising lyrics as he sings the song. This album boasts no less than 3 Velvet Underground covers. The song White Tornado answers the musical question, what if R.E.M. replaced Peter Buck with Dick Dale? And the song Burning Hell, well, it's just badass. This album might not offer a lot to the casual R.E.M. fan, but if you already have all their studio albums, the odds are you'll find a lot to like here. In August of 1987, the band dropped Document. This is the band's first LP with engineer turned producer Scott Litt, and I really feel that Scott Litt unlocked something in the band's sound. I hear a brightness to this album, missing from their earlier work. If R.E.M. has a breakthrough album, it's this. It was the band's first album to go platinum, and 2 songs from this album reached mainstream success. The One I Love, the first single released from this album, and their first true hit reaching number 9 on the Billboard chart, and their second single from the album, It's the End of the World as We Know It, which only reached number 69 on the charts. Which is crazy when you consider that 2 years later, Billy Joel's far less interesting listing song, We Didn't Start the Fire, reached number 1. Hey Billy, who do you think you're fooling? Side 1 of this album is a perfect side of music. If side 1 of this album doesn't grab you, you won't like R.E.M. Finest Work song, kicks off the album with style. It's got a big guitar sound, very funky rhythm, epic backing vocals. It's a really, really big sound. My favorite song on this album is Exhuming McCarthy. It opens with the clacking of a typewriter, which is a sweet little touch, as Michael Stipe wrote all of his lyrics on that typewriter. Exhuming McCarthy is an undeniable Reagan-era rocker that cleverly takes down the right-wing politicians who have exhumed Senator McCarthy in the sense that they were overstating a perceived communist threat. When did a Republican ever cause trouble? The band covers the song Strange by the British band Wire. All apologies to 12XU by Minor Threat, but Strange by R.E.M. is my favorite cover ever of a Wire song. On paper it shouldn't work, but damn it if the boys don't pull it off. Whereas Wire's original is kind of monotonous and drony, R.E.M. turned it into a frenzied rave-up, and it sounds right in their wheelhouse. The song Lightnin' Hopkins may be named after the old blues man, but this track is way more funky and weird than anything Lightnin' ever did. It's as close as R.E.M. came so far to an industrial sound, and Mikey's bass line in this is massive. The One I Love is a beautiful love song, or is it? This one goes out to the one I love. This one goes to the one I left behind. A simple prop to occupy my time. I see this song as being inspired by Rockstar Life, where love is disposable and something you use to kill time in a city. It's one of the greatest fake-out love songs ever, because it's actually pretty ruthless. I don't have to talk too much about It's the End of the World as we know it. I think we all know the song and the amazing video. If you don't, I'll have a link to it below. It is straight up stream of consciousness. If you're looking for the song's DNA, you can find it in a song like Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues. But what Michael Stipe did brilliantly is to weave in the stream of consciousness with actual historical events and dreams that he actually had and experiences that the band had on the road. So it's really a mishmash of all of those together. And again, it shouldn't work, but it does, which is the genius of R.E.M. I absolutely love this album, and it's one of my favorites by the band. In November of 1988, the band released Green. Hello, major label. Goodbye songs in a minor key. Once again, Scott Litt and R.E.M. worked beautifully together. This first album with major label Warner Brothers was a big move up for the band profile-wise, and they proved themselves equal to the task. This was the first LP, believe it or not, to feature lyrics, though only the lyrics to the song World Leader Pretend were included. And I've got to say that for a band like R.E.M., who have such brilliantly cryptic lyrics, including their lyrics on the early albums would have only enhanced the band's appeal. In general, this album is fairly schizophrenic. I think Brev Mikas would have liked it. You could also define this album by saying that it has great variety, with plenty of big arena rockers, such as Pop Song 89, Get Up, and Stand. Some quieter moments that belie their indie rock roots, such as You Are the Everything, World Leader Pretend, and Hair Shirt, and songs that straddle both definitions, such as Orange Crush and Turn You Inside Out. Pop Song 89 is a perfect way to open this LP, as it announces to R.E.M. fans, both old and new, that R.E.M. were now playing on a much bigger stage. Lyrically, the song is a sly wink that this band is no sellout, as the song skewers the disposable nature of most pop music of its day. It is impossible for me to hear the song Stand without thinking of the Chris Elliott series Get a Life, which used the song as its theme song. And that isn't a bad thing, as it always makes me smile. Stand proved that the band could write a big, popular, sing-along song that doesn't make me want to vomit. I'm looking at you, shiny, happy people. Long before Alice in Chains' Rooster, R.E.M. were the ones with the super cool Vietnam-inspired video for Orange Crush, which is the Johnny Got His Gun of pop songs, casting a jaundiced eye towards this country's military policy overseas, and what it's done to its fighting boys who bring their bodies home, yet remain forever damaged by their war experiences. My deep cut on this album is I Remember California, a moody mind-bender about a world in which the titular state has been destroyed. It's a slower song, but it's got massive energy, thanks to Bill's powerhouse drumming and Peter's wailing guitar sound. I feel it gets unfairly overlooked due to the more high-profile songs on this album, but it's probably my favorite song here. This album was a big success for the band, and their new label couldn't have been happier, as its first 3 singles all charted in the top 20. The band toured this album on and off for the next 2 years. In that time, the band evolved quite a bit. This album, I would later realize, was the end of the R.E.M. that I personally loved. In March of 1991, R.E.M. released Out of Time. This was a massive record that deserved all of the accolades it received. And I liked Losing My Religion the first 3 million times I heard it, but by the 6 millionth time, not so much. Listen, I could appreciate most of the album, especially Texarkana and Near Wild Heaven, but outside of the one song that I absolutely positively loved, Country Feedback, the band was moving into territory that didn't interest me. For me, I just dug my heels in and cherished my 80s albums even more. For a great overview of 80s R.E.M., check out Eponymous. This came out in October of 1988. This album finally fulfilled their contract with IRS. It's got a stellar selection of songs from their first single all the way up through Document, but it's not exactly a straight-up greatest hits. It includes a couple of alternate mixes of Gardening at Night and Finest Work Song. It's got the original single mix of Radio Free Europe, and it includes a very early R.E.M. song called Romance, which was used on the soundtrack to a very crappy Timothy Hutton movie. For anyone looking for a nice overview of the band's early years, this is a fantastic choice. And it might be all some of you need. Some of you, though, need everything, and you know who you are. I hope you enjoyed this not-so-brief overview of 1980s R.E.M. If you did, please do me a favor and click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.